VenomfangX has made a video with a very interesting question. The question is, have you ever wondered, he asks, if evolution wasn't true, what are the implications? It's a question I've often pondered upon. You know, before we go directly into that, let me say that there are tens of thousands of scientists involved directly or indirectly with evolution, and there has been for the 150 years since Charles Darwin's time. We're talking of paleontologists, obviously, embryological and developmental biologists, more lately geneticists. We're talking about people like anatomists, taxonomists, morphologists. There's a whole raft of disciplines in biology related to, either directly or indirectly, to evolution. But you know, despite all of that, the whole theory of evolution, the sole evidence that it rests upon, is in the differential beak sizes of a series of finches in the Galapagos Islands. Well, at least that's how VenomfangX has portrayed it in his latest video. Quite bizarrely, that isn't the sum of the evidence that Darwin presents. It's just one facet of the evidence that Darwin presents. VenomfangX ignores the remainder of the book, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. He also ignores 150 years of science since. I ask this question to you, VenomfangX. What the fuck do you think these scientists have been doing in the 150 years since that book? Obviously you feel it's so inconsequential or so irrelevant that you not even feel it necessary to mention. No, all that matters is these finches, and the fact that these finches alone aren't evidence for evolution, aren't conclusive proof of the theory of evolution as being factually true, are enough to dismiss it outright. But what about his question then? If evolution wasn't true, what are the implications? There are so many threads of evidence from so many different fields that all give the same result. Whether we look at, for example, we can make taxonomic trees. We can look at the relatedness of animals in different ways. We can look at them through the fossil record. We can make a tree. We can look at them through their DNA and we can make a tree. We can look at them through their morphology and we can make a tree. However we do it, we get the same tree. Okay, occasionally some of the little twigs, we're not quite sure where the twig went. We have what's called convergent evolution, and sometimes that happens on a small scale between species that are quite closely related, and it's quite difficult to know what branched where. Sometimes when we go a long way back, it's quite difficult to know quite which group, which clade branched off before another one. We can't always tell that, but the basic structure of these trees, down to quite high detail, are the same, using these different methods. So what are the implications if evolution isn't true? The implications are mind-boggling. The implications are stupefying. For all this evidence to point to evolution, for the genetic evidence that points towards evolution, not the similarities, the genetic similarities, but the distribution of genetic differences, the distribution of retroviruses, the distribution of synonymous genetic substitutions, the distribution of unitary pseudogenes. Some of these things, for evolution not to be true, and for these things to fit together so beautifully and so perfectly, is absolutely mind-boggling. I cannot think of a simile, of an analogy, of a coincidence that would be even in the same league that this would have to be for evolution not to be true. That is the implication of evolution not being true. VenomfangX then goes on to discuss the morality implications of if evolution was true. In fact, a lot of the moral implications, a lot of the problems that we have are much bigger problems if evolution isn't true. But the point I really want to bring up is this point of moral absolutes that he talks about. I want to know where his moral absolutes are. The fact is that VenomfangX doesn't believe in moral absolutes. He believes that whatever his God decides is moral is moral. If his God decides tomorrow that torturing babies is moral, which according to him his God can do anything and his God can decide that. If his God decides tomorrow that torturing babies is moral, then he'll hold his hand up as a signed and sealed baby torturer, and he'll be off first thing in the morning torturing babies. His morality is not based in absolutes, it's based in the relative subjective morality that his God decides on a whim, and that his God has altered over the years. What his God regards as moral now, his God didn't regard as moral in Old Testament times. So there's certainly no absolute morality from where he stands. The evolutionary perspective gives you a much more absolute morality, not in terms of the details, but in terms of the basic moral framework. You only have to understand the basic tenets of reciprocal altruism and of nepotistic altruism to understand where the fundamentals of our morality come from. You only have to understand the implications of the evolution of empathy to understand where some of the complexities of our morality stem from, and that all societies, irrespective of their religion or whether they're religious at all, still subscribe to these basic moral tenets. So they're as close to being absolute as you can get, a lot more close to being absolute than the morality of VenomfangX and his God.